All righty. Well, welcome everybody to the May 16th BCPC monthly advisory meeting. If you weren't here last month, I'm Malika Ohm. I'm filling in for Shelby Arthur as she is on family leave. You'll be stuck with me for at least the next month or so. So forgive me for any hiccups in some of the information. I'm still learning it all, but I'm happy to be here and learn with you all as well. If you could take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization and role, and the coverage area or areas that you serve. We'd love to use this meeting as an opportunity to engage with all of the stakeholders throughout the Tri-County area. And sometimes there's connections you just didn't know that you haven't made yet. So please take a moment and do that. That would be awesome. Thank you. And let's see, I think we can go ahead and go through the agenda now. So this is our agenda for the day. We'll be going through welcome and introduction. So welcome again and introducing myself. On the BCPC team here, we have, let's see, do folks on the team want to give a brief intro for new? Maybe we can start with Nadine. We can start with Nadine there.
Yes, hi everybody. I am in charge of comms for BCPC. I've been a little over a year working here, and it's really great. And I am excited to grow with everybody.
Thank you. Tim, I see you're here.
Yes, Tim is here. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim, doing mapping, GIS, and data management for the Broadband Consortium.
And thank you, Tim. Bill?
Hi, everyone. I'm here working with the county admin office in San Luis Obispo and working on broadband, but also in the budget. Right now we have budget on our brain with getting ready for the budget hearings in June.
Well, thanks, Bill. Bill Simmons.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm happy you introduced
Forgot there were
yourself.
two bills.
You've been double billed.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that's a good one. I like it.
Bill Simmons, I'm working on the Ventura County Broadband Initiative with the consortium.
And last but not least is Vivian.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Vivian Vasquez, working with the BCPC Ventura team and slowly transitioning out of that work towards the end of this month. But Malika and Bill have you in very good hands in Ventura.
Vivian has been instrumental in getting the Ventura County Strategy Project started, and we are losing her to the Department of Labor, which is a great loss for us, but win for them, and we're really appreciative of all her efforts. So let's move on to county updates if we can. We can start with San Luis Obispo County. Since Bill Lucia, since you already introduced yourself, anything new and happening going on in San Luis Obispo County?
Well, yes, there are a few things. We're working on low-level design with a ladder grant, so that's still underway. We unfortunately had to pull back some of the ARPA broadband money, and we're in the process of hearing from the board about how or if they want to repurpose any of it. We had 5 projects slated to do some dark fiber to various DSS offices throughout the county. The Paso Robles leg of that is still going to continue, but the others are going to pause at design work and get a read from the board in our June budget hearings about if and how to go forward on that. And we're hoping to hear from you all about the role of government here, particularly in light of the May revision and anything else that is coming down this summer with consequences from what's happened with the governor's plan, and seeing what the legislature does with that when they get to the final budget that wraps up at the end of June. for July 1 fiscal year.
Yeah, that is definitely a hot topic. And maybe we can revisit that after we do our county rounds. Because I'm sure that will take some content there. I don't know, do we have any other San Luis Obispo folks on here, county or city, and with any updates to the region in that county?
I don't see anybody else, but just saying hi.
Yeah.
Michael Foote, Economic Development Director at Reach. And yeah, I think Bill summarized pretty well what's going on in the county, and just good to have conversation today.
Great, great. And Jeff Buckingham, I see you on there. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, we're finishing up on projects we've got started. Probably the biggest thing going on with us right now is we're finishing up 2 underground routes from our data center in Slow to Grover Beach, where we're building a new cable landing station and landing a Pacific cable. That's pretty much Grover Beach, Morro Bay, and Paso Robles. Fiber to the home is pretty much done. There's just a few little finishing touches being done there, and we're evaluating other projects. We're building in a Atascadero between the city and buildings, and we're waiting to see what happens with some grant applications there. So a lot of things going on, but there aren't any big new ones to announce yet.
Got it. Did you come up with a brilliant name for your fiber city?
I think we're coalescing around the idea of fiber city as opposed to gigabit city. Love to hear if anybody else has any thoughts about that, but just as being a more expansive name that can grow beyond that tiny gigabit speed, you know.
Yep. We continue to think and brainstorm.
Yeah.
We love Moore Park. I'll throw that out there.
All right, Santa Barbara County, if we can move down the coast here. I see Chris on the line. I don't want to call you out, but anything new and interesting you'd like to share on behalf of the county?
Well, good morning, Malika. Good morning, everyone. You know, I was just thinking, has there been anything really new in our county since last month? And I don't know if, I know we shared what we were up to last month. I don't know if there's anything really new. Just kind of recapping, still waiting on FFA decisions. We have identified some additional areas in North County that we're going to be doing some high-level network design on. But outside of that, Malika, maybe you can think of something else. I know you're working closely with us.
Yeah, I just think, you know, SBCAG and the 3 areas in the, as a part of the county's LATA grant, the programmatic EIR is in the finishing stages, and we hope to hear and share some public announcements on that throughout the summer. A JPA amendment that would provide SBCAG the authority to facilitate broadband developments within the county, with permitting still sitting in local jurisdictions. And then again, and as you had mentioned, high level design and increased areas with the efficiencies that the county has done in covering the first 4 identified areas, then the next 5 identified areas, and potentially some new areas, and by working efficiently, still having some funds to be able to potentially cover those. And in terms of the County of Santa Barbara, or the area of Santa Barbara in digital equity, the city of Galeta continues to offer some digital literacy courses that are free to residents throughout the county. And those do come with, you know, training in addition to device access. And I know that the Digital Equity Coalition in Santa Barbara is also working on updating the website to use as a resource for practitioners versus, you know, and have it be a tool for folks who need to access resources and or contacts for digital equity and literacy in the county. So we'll hope to see some progress there throughout the summer, and in the fall have a launch of additional resources, collaborative resources there. All right, so we can move down to Ventura County. Jory, would you like to give any updates relative to the counties?
Certainly.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
The county is just like everyone else waiting on FFA determinations. There have been quite a number of significant events that have taken place within the county on the first leg of the county build along the 126 highway. We are putting together now the rights of way access with the cities and the county. That'll be including Santa Clarita, Fillmore, Santa Paula, Ventura, as well as Oxnard and Wainimi as part of the bill. You all may recall that we've informed you about a joint build with CDT, and the CDT will be building with us from the state middle mile on the 5 freeway all the way to the 101. We hope that this will help ensure good results from the FFA work that the CPUC is now doing. I think you've all probably heard from the CPUC on your FFA applications. If you haven't, you will hear very shortly. Not a notice of award at this point in time, but they're starting to ask questions because the applications are now in the 60-day review period, and they do expect to get things completed before the end of June. We have many agreements between Astound and the county, Astound and the CDT, the county and the BCTC right of way. And we're slogging through some CEQA issues and perfecting the 90% design, which we are now almost complete with, and will be finished sometime here within the next few weeks. We are still getting good quotes from the plowing vendor that we expect to work with Astound. And the budgets have been solidified. The numbers are still holding true. And with the idea about securing the CPUC notice for the FFA award, we expect to break ground sometime at the end of this calendar year or the beginning of 2025.
Thank you. That was comprehensive. Do we have any other folks from Ventura County that would like to contribute or discuss anything new within the county?
So on the Moore Park side, in our ongoing quest to attract a second ISP to challenge Spectrum, our incumbent provider, we actually are now talking to 2 additional potentials. I've gone down this road without success a number of times, so I'm always guarded to get my hopes up too high. But one of them I'm less optimistic about, and one I'm probably as optimistic as I've been in many years. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully we are on the path to success.
Thanks for sharing that. In terms of the Ventura County regional strategy, we are moving into the phase of municipal and community engagement. So we're working with municipal partners and some community-based organizations to engage leaders and stakeholders throughout the county to identify, to get some ground truthing as to whether the data that we have aligns with what's going on in people's homes and businesses. Also to identify priority needs in areas and barriers and opportunities to deployment and adoption. So we're working through that process now. We hope to have an initial draft of the regional strategy towards the end of summer, as we compile all of our community engagements and continue on the community needs surveys and speed tests. So if you do live in Ventura County, or you are a friend of anybody in Ventura County, please encourage them to participate in our community needs survey. It's 5-6 questions on our website. We can drop that link in the chat, and also do a speed test. Do a speed test in your, at home. I think that we're going to see some relevance to that moving forward with BEAD and identifying opportunities there. Jory, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Malika. Yeah, I think it's probably relevant to speak of something else which is taking place in Ventura County. I'm not certain how much we've made you all aware of this, but the Las Virgenes Malibu Council of Governments is also working on a fiber master plan, but they've also engaged now in design engineering and using Measure M funds from the County of Los Angeles ballot initiative, including Westlake, which is in Ventura County. Westlake, Agoura Hills, Calabasas, Hidden Hills, and Malibu are all now finishing up. In about 2 more weeks, we'll be finishing up the design engineering for that network. And that network at some point has the opportunity to connect through Westlake Village on the 101, 2000 Oaks to join phase 3 of the Ventura County network build. So it could be just like Santa Clarita is just outside of Ventura County. There is a partner just on the border of LA County there, and the COG will also more than likely be a potential partner to provide for shared government services, especially connections to San Jose and to One Wilshire Pops.
That's cool. I haven't heard about that yet. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I know that folks are chomping at the bit to maybe discuss some of the May revisions proposed. And I wanted to invite anybody who has deeper insight, because it's kind of weighty to read through and understand. From what we're seeing is that the May revision in terms of broadband has requested, let's see, a $200 million delay in last mile funds from 25-26 to 26-27. That the funds for those last mile grants, I believe they're referring to the FFA last mile grants, and that fund is approximately $2 billion, made up of 1.45 from general funds and 550 from leftover ARPA coronavirus COVID capital projects fund. So I'm not sure exactly how that reduction or delay would pan out in terms of existing FFA applications. In addition, and this one is I'm not entirely clear about, so if I'm incorrect here, please correct me. But on the loan loss reserve plan fund, there is a proposed reduction in availability throughout the next 2 years, in addition to the MMBI funds. Now
700 million.
700 million for the loan loss reserve.
50 million will remain.
50 million will remain in the loan loss reserve. That's confusing to me, because it looks as though the funds that where they're pulling it from are 150 from 23-24, right? And then additional funds for the next 2 years. So the May revision is proposing to cut the loan loss reserve all the way down to 50 million from a 700 million pool?
It was originally 750.
750, gotcha, okay. Okay, and I believe the most recent application period, there was about just under 500 million in applications for support in that fund, with Golden State Connect Authority being the primary applicant. Anybody correct me if I'm wrong there? And with Golden State Connect Authority participating in quite a few FFA applications throughout the state, I wonder if that would have an impact in their ability to execute on FFA applications as they're using that fund as a loan instrument.
What we're hearing, if I might,
Yes,
Malika,
please.
what we're hearing from the CPUC, from John Baker, is that this is going to impact the less priority or lower priority segments of the MMBI first before it impacts any of the last mile applications. And so we're going to be seeing quite a number of the MMBI segments being postponed. But we already knew that. This is kind of old news. This is just coming right back around, but it also tells us how serious the budget issues are. And, you know, areas that I think we all kind of know that are in densely populated areas where the MMBI was going to serve, those are probably going to go by the wayside for now, if not forever. And even areas like Topanga Canyon, probably more local to some of us here in Ventura County, will go by the wayside as well. So we'll see MMBI segments being lowered in priority first before this impacts last mile FFA. But of course, it will impact FFA as well. So no doubt we will probably hear that there just wasn't enough money to go around.
And I was reading through the LAO's summary in February on the original early action proposal, and it seemed as though one suggestion from the legislative analyst office was for legislature to consider the allocation of BEAD funding while considering what funds are available for FFA. So what that would feel like to me is that as communities are trying to engage in secondary options, should FFA, who knows what happens, it would behoove folks to engage in the BEAD challenge process and understanding BEAD a bit more as it is panning out. And the CPUC did vote on the draft proposal last week, but they have not released, from my understanding, any timelines on the challenge process quite yet. But within the draft proposal, it does say the process needs to begin within 60 days, with maps being released 7 days prior to the challenge process commencing.
Right. I have not heard that it's going to affect IT2, nor have I heard that it's going to affect CASF.
Yeah, CASF, because CASF is funded by the surcharge rate, I haven't heard anything as to that being funded. I mean, being impacted as well. And yeah, you're correct. And then the State Digital Equity Plan is an NTIA funded initiative, so we wouldn't see that as an effect as well. Any other folks have any insight on the May revision or would like to get anything off their chest there?
Yeah, I do. This is Bill from San Luis County. I think, Malika, I think you're right in pointing out the LAO analysis. It looks like finance copied some of their recommendations or took to heart some of the recommendations, and they are of concern in that, at least for our county, the loan loss reserve clearly is part of the whole package of how to make some of the projects actually viable. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens. Also, as the tendency is in Sacramento to kind of look things at a high level, it's not clear to us how there can be just a swap. I mean, it looks like on one hand, it looks like a convenience. Oh, you've got 2 billion here. You're going to get 2 billion from the feds. Let's swap it out and, save the money or delay the money and have more general fund cash flow. But as we know, there isn't a one for one. And in terms of projects where you can just say, okay, we're going to substitute some federal money. There's some discussion in the LAO analysis about the possibility of it not being considered supplanting, but that's a moot point if it's a totally unviable project now because the loan loss reserve is gone. So we're still trying to sort out what's going on, and it may be a challenge to actually figure out. Okay, good news, you get FFA because it's the 200 million is being postponed from not the current tranche, but the out year tranche. Okay, fine. But then if you don't have loan loss reserve, then you're stuck in the mud, at least with the polygons you may have prioritized to go forward with. And it's not clear that the BEAD money is coming fast enough to be able to swap it out. And we're part of the RCRC JPA, and they're really nervous because as a client, as a partner, we've asked what are their thoughts about the possibility of amending our FFA application if we were to get good news and have it awarded. And they're very reluctant to, have any even dialogue about, indicating that there's a plan B within FFA, let alone some kind of a notion that we would try and figure out how to swap a BEAD application for the same project. So lots of challenges we see in the near horizon.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I haven't heard from RCRC yet in terms of their reactions to all of this. So if you have anything, please do feel free to share as well. But yeah, it feels like a tumultuous time and 30 days to make a decision here. So we'll all be on pins and needles. Well, 30 days for that. And then in that time frame, CASF infrastructure grants should be awarded within 15 days of that, or announced, in addition to FFA applications, right, within that time frame, in addition to a BEAD challenge process, potentially. So the next 30 to 60 days will be pivotal in understanding what the future looks like for funding in the broadband space. So we'll keep looking out on that. Anyone else want to contribute or? Josh, the 60-day review period for BEAD, is that what you're asking? The 60-day period that I'm referring to is 60 days from the May 9th vote that when CPUC voted on the draft proposal. They have 60 days to release or begin the challenge process of BEAD. And once the challenge process begins, there will be 30 days for local governments, nonprofits, and tribal nations to submit challenges to the map that would have been released at least 7 days prior to that 60-day period. So there's 30 days to submit a challenge. And within that, and after that 30 days, I believe the model is that CPUC will cure that for 14 days and then submit and then provide for ISPs and providers to rebut any challenges for 30 days. And then after the rebuttals are received, there's about 14-day curing process again, I believe, where 14 to 30 days, I'm not quite sure on that one, where the CPUC can review and cure again, and then submit to NTIA for final eligible locations. Oh, FFA is in the 60-day review period in the context of CPUC continues to tell us that FFA awards will be announced by the end of June. That's what we're referring to.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, we can move to the next slide now. So we'll go into the meat of today's content. You know, as you know, we like to share what's going on in the broadband space and then provide a little bit of food for thought and open for discussion and input as we continue to, you know, build on broadband within our community and our Tri-County area. And today, our guest speaker will be Bill Simmons, who you've seen and most of you already know, and talking about the collaborative catalyst in broadband for all. So I'll let you take it, Bill.
Malika, and I'm going to be fascinated to look at the recording when this is all said and done. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. We're learning a lot right now. We're going through a process and we're learning as we're flying. And sometimes we learn that we've flown backwards, if it makes sense. But I'm going to just give you a stream of consciousness of some of the things going on and some of the activities and foundational things that we're talking about and talk about lessons learned. And I'd like to keep it as collaborative, as communicative, as facilitated as possible in terms of everybody giving feedback, because I do want to recognize that we're learning. What we do believe is that we're on the tipping point. We're getting to that in the funding and projects and technology and everything is part of that tipping point. To have FFA coming down and to have proposals that are in for middle mile and last mile, and to talk about creating organizations that are going to be providing governance to all the things that are happening on these projects, and to actually at the local level try to create all the impetus required to deliver broadband for all is a big undertaking. And if we do it right, it's transformational. But there's a lot of headwinds that slow us down from just making it happen with a magic wand. If you look back at the industry of telecom, you had phone companies, and then eventually you had cable companies. And for the longest time, they had their space, the phone companies and the cable companies. And then the internet came and you had phone companies and cable companies wanting to become internet companies. And so you have all of these different models of these different companies where phones were okay and TV was okay, but now we've got the internet and trying to put square pegs in round holes and create new models for what today looks like is part of what we're experiencing right now. At the same time, the industry was doing all of this, and we have a public sector imperative to be part of this. From the public side, and I've been a private industry advocate all my career, you know, let the telecoms do it. Well, COVID was a very humbling experience because it taught us that there was a lot that we didn't know that we didn't know. And we now have recognized that this truly has to be a collaborative undertaking. And yet I'm thinking from conversations in the last month or two that we're still trying to figure out what that looks like and how that works. When you have a catalyst coming down of funding as well as organizations, as well as deployment followed by adoption, you know, and we're gonna be rallying all the stakeholders and rallying all the partners to be able to, do that, pull this off. How does that occur? One thing for sure is industry's got to change, and they're very resilient to that. Not resilient, resistance. At the same time, the public sector's got to change, and in a similar way, resistance is there as well. And what we're in the process of doing is creating these new ways of doing business. And there'll be some new business models. You have some cities that are leaping out and being ready to change and innovate, and they're going to be the early adopters for the new changes. And you have some companies that are doing the same as well, and they'll be the early adopters. But I think my interest in all of this is just being an observer and trying to communicate what's happening as it happens. And so as we get into the next 3 slides and talk about this a little bit more, I want to stress that I've got some deficiencies in that I'm an engineer, so I talk technical. I'm an academic, and so I talk technical. I'm coming out of the defense industry, so I talk like technical. But at the same time, the semantics and the words that we use mean so much. And what we're trying to really deal with in many cases are the words. And so what we find, and where we'll go with these slides, is we started with a term about a community network. And the reason why I'll get to let me get into the next couple of slides, and then we'll talk about the networks involved. So here is basically what's happening and coming down the pipe, and we're talking 30, 60 days and what we've been talking about so far this morning. Next slide, please. Adoption is going to be a key thing. What we find out is we have areas that just don't pencil out, and it costs money, and there's not a big return. And so public sector has to get involved. This is something new. We also find that we want to have open access for a number of folks, that anybody on an industry side that wants to get involved can get involved. And then once we get into these areas, there are certain things that we want to do related to literacy and education. This is a conversation we haven't had pre-COVID. You know, the imperative is there. It's quite obvious. And we know that broadband for all, we need to do exactly that, broadband for all. We have to be able to access these areas, provide access to industry to serve these areas, and then the programs that happen. And while we do that, we want to be transparent. We want to be accessible for anybody that wants to participate in terms of industry, as well as community-based organizations serving these populations. Next slide, please. At the same time, we need networks that are resilient. We've had issues when we have fires. We have issues when we have earthquakes. We have issues, especially in today's climate, with cyber and in terms of national security, where companies are being bombarded constantly, you know, and networks have to stay up. They have, in the industry, in the defense industry, we call them hardened. They have to be robust and be able to defend. And if one fails, you got to have a second one kick in, and you have to have option after option after option, and redundant, and you name it. And so we're not there today. You know, if we have one provider and then that's all you have, and it goes down, you're down. And we've got to change that. And everybody, I think, is recognizing that. Who's responsible for that? Is it the one provider? Well, or is it the public sector? Or is it the customer? Well, I think it's an important conversation, and the conversation needs to be occurring now as part of this discussion about broadband. Next slide, please. Then I'm preaching to the choir here. Everybody is aware of all the changes that are occurring with the technology, AI, you know, cameras, sensors, you name it. If we don't have this robust infrastructure, if we don't have this throughout, we're not going to be able to deploy the technologies that are coming online right now. It just is not right. It's not pretty. It's a mess when you have all kinds of non-uniform infrastructure throughout a community. And in some areas served and not served. The past is not going to be acceptable for the future. And so these things are going to be very, very pivotal. And without a basic function, a way to get into certain areas, you're not going to be able to have these technologies deployed. So last slide, I promise, coming up. What happens, what this elephant looks like is the chart on the lower bottom on the left. Basically, we need solutions that bridge a gap in the underserved areas. We need solutions that deal with resilience. We need solutions that enables competition and affordably open access, if you will. And we need solutions that are going to be very, very supportive of what the governments need and what the communities need, and that are going to be able to be resilient in the case of failovers and redundancies. People don't necessarily feel comfortable with the term network. I'm not ready to jettison it yet. But we started talking about community networks, and we found that using the term community networks, we were leaving out the aspect of public leadership. The things that we talk about, these networks need to be, these are policy decisions. These are important parts of communication in City Hall. And making sure that there is competitive access, making sure that there is a grid for all any and all communities to serve wirelessly or otherwise, areas that are typically unserved, and the applications that are going to be needed throughout communities. There is a public leadership imperative here. And yet, so community networks wasn't saying that. And so then we went to municipal networks. And we've been, in the last week or two, been reconsidering that discussion, and the reason being is the public side can't do this necessarily. That's my opinion. But what we find is that the innovation occurs on the private side, and if you really want to put something in place, you want it to be able to have the capacity to innovate as technology innovates, and that's more of a private sector thing. And so municipal networks really there is a perception that we're talking about public, not just the leadership and governance side of it, but ownership and operation. And that's not what we're talking about here. As of today, my thinking on this subject is using the word collaborative. It's maybe we're talking about a collaborative network where it really is public and private, where it really is the best of both sides doing this together, where a P3 really does mean it's a partnership, not just public, not just private, but a partnership of the best of both. And what does that look like? CPUC provides us with a full range of models, the drawing on the right at the bottom. And so there's more than one way to do this, and we're not going to tell anybody how they should be doing theirs. But I think that the big takeaway from all this is it's time for this conversation to occur. As these funds arrive, we need to be talking about how we're going to apply them. We need to be talking about how collaboration is going to, not just at the last mile for the house and people in a community, but for the community overall as a system. How is this technology going to be thoughtfully planned out for the future? This is a transformational moment, much like when highways started connecting communities. And if we're not having these plans and understanding the bigger picture, if we're just seeing the trees and not the entire forest, we're missing part of the conversation. And so that's my soapbox, and I'll share and let others have the floor as well to talk about some of these thoughts and learning. But I want you to know that we are working on the message and encouraging through focus groups and the conversations that the communities should be talking about with their providers about partnerships in these areas, in creating community strategies that are going to reflect how we're going to connect neighborhoods, not just within, but all around. Ryan, you look like you could say something, but I'm not. I would encourage you, invite you to follow up with any thoughts you have coming from the public perspective.
Yeah, from the public sector, and realizing that we're more on, well, anyone on this call, frankly, on the government side is already an outlier in terms of being proactive on broadband related issues. But if you get into the nitty gritty of what Moorpark has done over the past few years, and we had Dory and his team as a consultant here, is we changed the way that we did business to put ourselves into a position where we can facilitate deployment of these. I'll use the term community network here. And like literally while I've been on this call, I got an email from one of the ISPs we're talking to who wants to take advantage of that. So what that looks like is when we are doing capital projects that we realize are along valuable routes for future ISPs, we are putting in conduit. So the three that are there today, because this is a multi-year rollout, is we are underneath the railroad that bisects Moorpark. We are underneath the freeway that bisects Moorpark. And along one of our major east-west corridors, we have about 2/3 of that run that has conduit in it. When ISPs are evaluating both the cost and the time it takes to get permits to deploy a network, they're very interested in that. The discussion I'm having right now is, well, now that we are already underneath the railroad and you really don't need anything from the railroad to put your fiber in, that's absolutely worth a reroute of their plans. And, the negotiations that we have to advance our municipal goals is, hey, I'm going to save you 6 to 12 months in permitting, as well as the cost of physically installing underneath the railroad or dealing with Caltrans for a year to get underneath the freeway. In exchange for that, I want free internet service to all city facilities. I want you to serve this unserved business park or this unserved neighborhood. And, in exchange for this infrastructure that we put in really for pennies, since we were already building things, that absolutely is why I'm more optimistic with some of these ISPs in the current round that we're talking to, because it changes the calculus on their ROI. So definitely the public-private partnership, however, whatever the division is between those two and the outcomes, it does make a difference in the real world.
Fine talking to ISPs is you'll find different ISPs and they can tend to be stovepipe in these areas. Well, you show us a neighborhood and we'll cover it. Or, if you want to talk about competition or affordability, we've got programs. Or if you wanted to take care of, infrastructure things, let's talk about that. Or if we want to deal with resilience and fallback and, put another fiber line into, some of the key spots and we'll talk about that. The answer is yes. We want to talk about all those things. And I guess from a networking standpoint, that's why it has to be a network. It's why this thing is not just an elephant with many parts, but it's the whole elephant, from a community standpoint, that's where, and there are some ISPs now that are getting this, they are understanding this, but unless you are wanting to get to a point as an ISP where you're talking about the big picture, the forest, as well as the trees, figure out how to roll up your sleeves and have this conversation. It's very important. We talk about the community as a whole. I think the city hall will welcome you if you are interested in talking about the city, the community as a whole. It's not going to be one town that services, one company that services one town. It's going to be a whole ecosystem, if you will, of providers, technology providers, broadband providers, a number of different enablers. And this stuff is going to sort itself out. As technology has evolved, we've gone through higher levels of integration. And this we are integrating now at the community level, not the enterprise level and not at the individual level. We're integrating now at a higher level. And this will sort itself out. So if you're not going to roll up your sleeves and have this conversation as a business, the business will be left behind. And so and I do believe that's true for the public side. If the public city hall does not understand the complexity of what's happening, that's fine. Nothing will change. If ISPs don't understand what's happening, okay, nothing will change. But if you do understand the potential and opportunities here, you'll be extremely well positioned in terms of all the changes that are on their way. Thank you, Brian. Questions, comments, observations? You can throw tomatoes if you'd like.
Hey, Brian, this is John with the County of Santa Barbara. And Bill, feel free to chime in. Both of you are super interesting to listen to regarding all of this. So here's my question, Brian. Did you guys build the infrastructure and then they came? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, so the history for us, we got our political will because we had a city council member in 2016 run on a platform of broadband will solve all the city's problems.
Okay,
That
see, that's
probably
where I was
an
headed. Okay.
overstatement. I've told Bill many times, broadband is not really the #1 solution to anything, but it's probably the #2 to #5 to solution for almost everything. And so, we had, this is being recorded, but we had, social games that we have, here on the staff. Every time the word broadband came up in a city council meeting, we would take social actions, so to speak. What that did policy-wise was we
had a council who voted, said, hey, we got to intervene as a government into the broadband deployment space because we're not willing to just wait until capitalism takes care of it over the coming decades. So we all looked around here at City Hall and said, well, hey, we don't have, a broadband expert on staff. There's no position like that. So we do what all contract cities do, and we release an RFP and find a broadband expert, which was Jory and his team back when they were Magellan before they were acquired. So what we did was took a look at everything that we did in the day-to-day operation. So from permitting processes to lease templates for putting things on our streetlights and utility poles, to our list of capital projects that we had planned over the next 5 years, did a bunch of speed testing, did a bunch of what are the unserved areas here in the city. And then that culminated into an actual plan that was adopted by our city council. We've accomplished about 80% of I would call the paperwork and business practice things in there. And then for the physical infrastructure, it's a multi-decade build out, right? None of us have, gajillions of dollars and time to build these things, but it's piecemeal. And you look at it back in 2018, it was, okay, we'll put this in. No one's going to use this for a decade, or for however long. But now that we are in the future, I've got a 10-year-old piece of conduit that I put in, just kind of, well, it doesn't serve anything as part of this rail crossing, but I did it because I was trenching underneath it already for all these sensors and other cabling for the actual rail crossing. But now I have people who are interested in it. Before, when we expanded our train station parking lot, we never would have put fiber conduit in it, because why would you do that? But we're pouring a new sidewalk, so we put in the conduit because it was just easy and cheap to do. For the new development going on literally next door to our train station, there are street improvements. They're putting in sidewalks and utilities, and we required them to put in conduit for us. And now we're going to connect that to our train station. So when you put this all together from, let's say, 5 years ago to where I am today, when I'm talking with these ISPs about the viability of coming to Moorpark, the conversation has changed. So the first couple, back in 2018, they were looking at, well, wait a second, you don't have overhead utility lines? I'm like, pretty much no, because the vast majority of Moorpark was built in the 80s and 90s. So it's just like, oh, well, forget it. It's too expensive to trench. So, they're out. Now, I think the more broad acceptance of micro trenching has certainly changed the math. And now they're saying, oh, well, you can save me a year of dealing with Caltrans and dealing with the railroad authorities. Oh, well, that's really great. And in exchange for that, our intent is to use what infrastructure we do have to say, oh, and now I want you to serve this unserved business park. Now I want you to give me free dark fiber connecting my facilities as you build out, because I'm paying someone $75,000 a year for that now. That's an ongoing annual savings to the city. Oh, you want access to my infrastructure? I want, X% of your revenues as, your rent for being in our infrastructure. So those conversations, we have more to offer now as a result. And that's why I'm hopeful we can actually lure that second or third or fourth ISP into the community.
And you're not offering lit services, you're just offering infrastructure.
Correct. Yeah, I didn't need a consultant to tell me that it was not worthwhile for us to trench every single street to every single house when we had nothing to start with.
Right. Well, good on you. Nice job, Brian.
Well, thank you, former council member Simons. I'll give credit where that's due.
I'll just chime in real quick, Bill, and echo a little bit of what Brian said. But I'm really encouraged over the last few years about the greater interest in partnering between public and private entities. In San Luis Obispo, probably 20 years ago, we put in a massive kind of conduit infrastructure and essentially offered it to ISPs in the area to say, hey, we want to expand these services, and we're willing to, do some partnership deals to give you access to this infrastructure we put in if you'll take us up on it. And we only had one local ISP do it, and we've been very happy with that partnership and the way that has evolved over the last 20 years. But I would have loved if other ISPs at the time, other incumbents, had taken us up on it, and it would have meant, even faster expansion of services to residents in our city. And it just, that hasn't happened up until very recently. We're starting to get more interest in other ISPs wanting to do that. And so I'm excited to see that this is all starting to come together now, and people are starting to realize that we can work together, and there are things that as a public entity we can do, maybe not more efficiently, but more expeditiously to get things in streets and whatnot. And we can change the, Brian said change the calculus of their ROI. I think that's exactly right. And I think we can help bridge the ROI gaps between, our low income communities and things, where if we can provide infrastructure that lowers the cost of ISPs to get there, it changes that ROI calculus so they can offer lower price services to low income neighborhoods and make it a viable business opportunity when they don't have to do the full infrastructure build out to those locations.
Yep. I'm encouraged too. I think your observations are spot on, Josh. The conversations are changing, and it's great to see. Talking about the picture before you, on the picture on the right, the full municipal broadband, the full private broadband, money is not the object here. Well, we can't do it. We have no funds. If you want to choose option one and a city needs to go out and get all the money, fine. That's an option. On the other hand, we've got the far other option, and it is industry goes off and does all the investment themselves. You have the whole spectrum of options here. There is no reason why the conversation has to stop because of funds. And so that's a very, very important thing to realize. Where I'm really encouraged, though, is in the last few months, I've started talking with ISPs that are interested in the picture on the left. And they're saying, how can we create a business model where we can enter into a P3, do a public-private venture with the city to be providing this collaborative network community-wide. And it's not about getting the profit off of any one case, but it's about providing this new higher level infrastructure that's going to be servicing a competitive collaborative environment for the city to move forward. And once these models start solidifying, and I've seen them moving in that direction, that's going to be the new standard. And so you can see it evolving, and you can see it coming into shape, and you're seeing companies come and wanting to play, but not everybody's there or understands it yet. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Bill. Does that imply that cities would no longer establish a contracted relationship with a sole source vendor for their city, and it would be an open market for citizens to choose the service that works for them?
I could take that one if you'd like, Bill. So mechanically, what we would be doing here in Moore Park, and it would be similar, I think, for these other agencies, is really what we're doing is entering into a contract with whatever ISP saying you have the ability to access the city-owned, so the public right-of-way. So, you want to put some conduit and fiber in our street? Well, that's my property. You can't do that without my permission. And, we can negotiate out what that looks like. I cannot imagine any agency would be willing to give an exclusive agreement in this day. So like if I'll just pick them because they're big and everyone knows, like AT&T would say, okay, AT&T is the only allowed vendor in the city of Moore Park. We would never enter into that deal. And so it's not that we are procuring a servicer to come provide this service to the capital C city government. It's you want to be in our right of way. So just like if another, sewer system or electrical company, we would allow that in addition to.
Other questions, other comments?
I think one point that sometimes we forget, but we all know, is kind of what Brian said in the context of broadband is not the number one solution for everything, but it could be this 2, 3, 4, 5 solution to almost everything. In the context of, yes, we serve students. They need to be able to access the internet at home so they can submit their homework, so they can apply for colleges, so they can receive their college acceptances, so they can, take their parents who've been working in the field to their graduation ceremonies and things like that. They're components to the people in our communities that the collaboration is worth the effort for, that we often forget because it is quite weighty to get to that place. But I think it's really exciting, and there's a lot of progress that is made, and it's really cool to sit in on the conversations with, ISPs who are really interested in engaging in that as well too. So
This picture is worth 1,000 words. I mean, I can't tell you. This week, an ISP said, well, we don't like the term municipal networks. That implies the government's going to do it all. No, 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 no. I mean, if you think that's the case, you're not hearing it. We're not saying it right. Something is going sideways. What we're looking for is the public side to, number one, clear the way. Just get out there and start solving the problems that we're talking about, and show some leadership, and open the doors and say, industry, come on and help us here. And that's why I'm really under the word collaborative at this moment. I mean, I think it's important that this is going to be the best of both. We're going to need to have governance, and that means a whole thing in terms of IT, and I get that, but we're going to need leadership, is probably the better word, of the public side to go do this. But then, we're going to need the innovation and the contributions and the co-investment and the collaboration of industry to be right there with them as a partnership. And this is a very different thing than we've ever had in the past. Julie?
Well, I agree with you. This graphic is brilliant. And as I'm looking at the yellow tags at the end, I only see one California city. And I'm wondering, just for grins and giggles, if it wouldn't be prudent to actually fill out this matrix and represent what we have in Ventura County now. What does it look like and feel like now? So that we know where we are, so then we can plot out where we want to be.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Great.
I can speak to Moore Park. It would be between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I have some general comments just for having worked with probably over 200 jurisdictions. There's a stage here, and the stage on partnership opportunities and various business models and the ways that municipalities can go about working their broadband future is really dictated a lot by the makeup of the community. Its location, proximity to to waterways, to freeways, very much just like how the railroads were built throughout the country. And if the railroad was built to your town thrived. If it passed you by, you became a ghost. This is very similar, but please know that the full utility model is not something that works very easily for municipalities. And the makeup of your community is really going to dictate, or should I say narrow, the opportunities of these various models that you can pick from. And whether or not you own your streetlights, and whether or not you bought those from Southern California Edison 10 years ago when the offer was made to you. So you have vertical assets in which to hang things. Do you have traffic signals? Do you own traffic signal interconnect? So you have duct under the ground already. Do you have a utility? And if you have a water utility, especially if you have an electric utility, then you might be able to consider a utility model if you can break through things like the union for the utility, and the union workers are going to say they want full pay as electric service crew, even though they're working on low voltage. Now, I don't know that you can afford to do that. We run into those kinds of things. So please know that this spectrum of things is not available to all of you. That there are narrow bands here that you can consider. And I do have to let you know that most of you without a utility, even many that do have an electric utility, And please know that many people who have an electric and a water utility run into the same kinds of problems because, well, one, the utility general managers don't understand the term joint trench. Joint utility trench is a new concept to a lot of these people, and they're not going to let you into building with their water system or their sewer system. They may not like you putting in your low voltage next to their high power, high voltage electric system. They don't want you anywhere near their gas. So there are even internal kinds of issues, not just the makeup of your community and where you're located and what you currently own that are going to dictate this. It's also some old school thinking and some mindsets that have to be broken. But please know that most municipalities, especially small municipalities without an electric utility, are going to choose a partnership model. You're not going to be able to build, own, and operate a network. And even if you try to, you're not going to get the grant money because you don't have the experience. And most grants require that you have at least 3 years experience operating a network. So back to, there's only really 1 or 2 choices you have here, most of you. I'm sorry, but it's just the fact.
No, but it's great.
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces of education we can be doing for all of the cities in our jurisdictions is these options 2 through 4, because I think for a really long time, we've only ever talked about options 1 or 5. Either a municipality does it all by themselves, or you only have private investment doing these things. And I think the reality is we need to be teaching people about how to do these public-private partnerships. I think, Jory, to your point and the experience requirements, I think we actually would be doing our citizens a disservice in a lot of ways if you don't have the experience to do this and you try to do it all on your own, because you're not going to give them the best service. You won't have the experience or the customer experience or the installation experience to really do this effectively. And so, partnerships, I think, give us some of the best of both worlds, and in order of serving the most people we can, getting the most affordable service to the most people we can, and making sure it's the best experience they can get.
You're more inclined to get more money, especially in this day and age, if you have an experienced partner and you have existing assets so that you can provide what's called local match during the grant process. So if you have poles, if you have underground conduit, if you have the electrical feeder for your streetlights, if you've got traffic signal interconnect already underground, if you've been following things like cities like Lathrop and you have capital projects and even Moore capital projects and development agreements that you leverage, and everything that happens when the ground is open, a conduit goes in for broadband future utility. That kind of broadband friendly thinking gets you a long way to continue to build incrementally and opportunistically while you take advantage of grants. But it's good for you to own it, but you're not going to be able to operate it. And so that's really where the partnership is so important. It's important for you to get the money so that you can study and you can do your planning like LADA did, and you can get your money like CASIF and like FFA, and in many of your cases, for many of you, BEAD and Reconnect out of RUS will be able to help you to build the infrastructure. But again, you're going to need a partner to do that, to get the money. You're going to need a partner to operate it. But the great thing about this is that for the first time, it's going to be owned by the public entity, which means that you have some control of the future, who your partner is, who comes to town, how you compete with the incumbents, how you connect your city facilities, how you get in-kind benefits for your community, like connecting your parks and Wi-Fi and your city facilities and other things. That allows you to now play in the game rather than being an outsider and not having any opportunity to persuade the providers on what kinds of services, what kinds of rates, and what kinds of public amenities can be made available. Josh, well said.
Oh, in closing, and I'll turn it back to Malika after this, but you know, there's two aspects to this. From an ISP standpoint, you know, I encourage ISPs to be talking about the picture on the left, to be thinking about the whole picture, to think about the forest, and to be asking about the forest, and to drill down and pursue models that are going to be, you know, helpful and for partnerships to occur. You know, and for cities, Tim Williams is no longer, you know, in the industry. You know, he's retired, but he used to say, and I loved the saying, he looks for cities that give us bear hugs. You know, and be one of those cities that open the door, and if you want to have the conversation about what's on the left, give them a bear hug. I mean, just really roll up your sleeves and start talking about these kinds of needs, these kinds of problems, and these kinds of opportunities, and think about those kinds of things, places where you can be writing grants together to get the funding to do it together. You know, this is the way collaboration is going to occur. And I just ask that you think in those terms, and not say, well, we never did it that way before. No, we got to, how are we going to do it in the future?
Yeah, Bill, you make up a good point. When you're doing it together, you're stronger because you bring more assets to the table and you bring more local match. Because the community can bring a local match in the form of their capital projects to grant applications, and having a partner in tow, they can also bring cash for local match too. That makes you a much more viable candidate for getting those grants from whatever the source might be. You're much stronger together than you are separate. But please know, not not every provider out there thinks like Tim Williams did, and they're all not into bear hugs. Some of them are stabbing you in the back with a knife. So be careful who you partner with.
That's right. Lika.
All right. Well, on that note, Nadine, could you move to the next slide, please? We just wanted to give wrap with a couple of updates. I'm sorry, does anybody hear feedback, or is it just me? Nope. Okay. It might just be me. My headphones. I need to retire these. But we just wanted to give you a couple of brief updates relative to the various funds and organizations within the broadband space. In terms of the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, the CDT has released the initial findings of the market sounding report, which they commenced to understand how to operate successfully and sustainably the Middle Mile network. It's an initial draft of the findings, and I believe then they will proceed with an RFP on understanding how to operate and manage the network. The legislative report is now available on their website as well, and there is an MMBI stakeholder meeting scheduled for January 31st. I think that will be a really important time to understand what is going to go on with May 31st, and it'll be a good time to understand what could potentially be cut or moved within the Middle Mile in consideration of the potential revision being accepted. Or as far as last mile programming, the FFA applications, I'm sorry, I think that was it is supposed to end in June. Awards should be announced by June, as they've been talking about, in addition to CASF infrastructure grants. But the public housing account and the tribal technical assistance program, in addition to the adoption account, is currently open. So we encourage folks to check those out or share them with other organizations in their community as relevant. Next slide, please. In terms of BEAD, as we mentioned earlier, the proposal was voted on May 9th, and the challenge process will need to begin within 60 days. The CPUC strongly encourages local governments, nonprofits, tribal nations, and ISPs to review the data once it's released and engage in the challenge process. Local governments are eligible for a free Tier E license with Cost Quest, which will give you access to the more specific map. So we would encourage you to request that license and begin to observe the map. You can access and participate in the challenge process without that license. You just don't have very specific location data. And the CPUC broadband caseworkers are available for direct assistance relative to BEAD, and as BEAD progresses as a fund there. There is, the upcoming webinar, this is an old one, but the upcoming webinar is May 21st for BEAD, that they are providing information on a toolkit for local governments and nonprofits to engage with individual citizens on the challenge process, because individuals cannot participate in the challenge process. So I will put a link in to that meeting when we follow up with the recording, and you can register for that. Again, it's May 21st, and it is the BEAD team's overview of the challenge toolkit that they're releasing. And the next slide. In terms of digital equity, the state digital equity plan does need to be officially submitted by May 28th for that 70+ million fund tranche that the NTIA has tentatively allocated to the state. They are going to be hosting a briefing on the implementation of the digital equity plan and the digital equity capacity grant NOFO on May 23rd. We will sit in on that and make sure we report back. If you have any specific questions related to the digital equity plan, please feel free to send them our way and we can ask on your behalf. For those folks in local governments, CETF is holding their local government working group opportunity. We encourage you to participate in that. It is an opportunity to engage with other local governments in our state, very much like the conversation we had today, but around focusing specifically on digital equity in terms of deployment and adoption. It's about a 2-hour workshop. I sat in the first one and it was very valuable. You'll see Brian Chong in that one tomorrow as well, if you're able to join. And for local governments that do participate in the workshop and submit a brief checklist on your current broadband state, you automatically receive a $1,000 grant from CETF to your local government to use for anything related to broadband and digital equity. And you can apply to become a part of a leading Pacesetter local government group that participates in 3 additional workshops over the 18-month period, and receive a $20,000 grant for your jurisdiction as well. And again, I'll send a link of that in follow-up as well. Or if you do not get that in time, please feel free to reach out to me too. Probably already received emails about that as well. And ACP, again, it is expiring this month with a partial reimbursement on there. This is the same data from last month, but it's just an emphasis again on the impact of losing ACP in our region in terms of coverage for folks who may not be able to afford it, or who may not know that they need to actually change their service levels so that they can afford a different service level. So I think we'll see a lot of a period of some problems and some challenges ahead should ACP not be refunded in the coming weeks. When I see Josh, you had asked if anybody's aware of the ACP extension. There are a lot of efforts in there. I think, yeah, Brian Chong, you wrote Cal Cities is pushing an ACP effort. There's a couple of different ways that legislators are trying to tack it on to other acts that are being voted on that keep being removed. But it's still top of mind for a lot of folks on there, and we continue. I think CSAC is also working on additional efforts in addition to the California school board association and parent PTA association as well. And final slide. So looking ahead to next month, we're going to hope to invite folks from CPUC, CDT, and NTIA to hopefully lead us in a discussion about BEAD, CASF funds, and the State Digital Equity Plan. And we'll also have our Tim Tierney go over our pilot map that he is creating in trying to understand how to utilize all these multiple maps and different data sources to pinpoint priority areas for deployment and adoption. And we'll kind of reveal what the progress is on that project there. So we hope you'll join us for that. And with that, the final slide is here. Our June special topic, funding for equity, surrounding that. And it is going to be, I believe it's June. What is the date? It's the third Thursday. So it should be June. Help me out here. June 20th? Is that what we're looking at?
21st.
21st, June 21st.
Just kidding, actually, it is the 20th.
Oh, June 20th. Okay, well, summer solstice. So we'll see you all on solstice. And we'll continue to stay on if anybody has any last minute questions or needs. But thank you so much for participating. It was a really robust conversation today, and we really appreciate all of your efforts in your communities and with the Broadband Consortium.